Please welcome the President and CEO of AHCA NCAL, Mark Parkinson.
Wow, this is a great crowd, and we want to thank all of you for being here with us this week. We know how hard the work that you do is in your buildings every day and every night, and so for you to take time out to spend time with us, we greatly appreciate it. We want you to enjoy yourself, relax, and hopefully pick up some things that are helpful when you go back to your buildings. Now, it's hard for me to believe this is my 14th year in coming out here and having a chance to talk with all of you. Those years have gone by incredibly fast. They've been terrific. I'm extremely grateful. We've had a lot of ups and downs, and I think back to the things that we thought were horrible problems 5 and 10 years ago, and I think with COVID we learned what terrible problems really were. So I'm very excited today to give you the update on COVID and let you know kind of exactly where we're at. But before I do that, I'm going to give you 2 other updates that cover topics that I've discussed at various times over the last 14 years, and then I will get to the COVID update. The first update's a little bit frivolous. The first update we're going to call Family, Kind of the Kansas City Chiefs, and Dumbness. Okay, you got that? Family, kind of the Kansas City Chiefs, and dumbness. Okay, so over the last 14 years since I've come out here, from time to time, I've shown you pictures of Stacy and our kids in our buildings when we were operators. And I wanted you to see, what our life was like, kind of because I wanted to show off the kids, but mainly because I wanted you to know that we know what you're going through every day. Well, those kids have grown up. Our 3 kids have grown up. They're adults now. They're doing great, I think in large part because of their time in our buildings. And our oldest now has kids himself. Alex, our oldest, and Kata, who thank God only live 3 miles from us, now have 2 kids. And here they are. Mark, who's 4.5, and Hala, who is 2.5. Now, because I grew up, for 66 years I've spent as a Kansas City Chiefs fan, including 50 years where we weren't very good. We were pretty bad. We raised our kids as Kansas City Chiefs fans, and their entire life the Chiefs were not very good. Because we've raised them that way, they have raised our grandkids now as Kansas City Chiefs fans. So this is a picture I showed a few years ago. That's Super Bowl Sunday 2019. That's myself, Alex, and Mark. We're all sporting Mahomes jerseys. And if you think that like Taylor Swift is the coolest person to sport a jersey, this is Hala. Okay, there we go. Okay, this is not a gloating thing though about the Kansas City Chiefs. It's not even a gloating thing about the grandkids. It's really about dumbness, okay? So I hear some chuckles. There may be some people that know about this. Every NFL team has a mascot. The Kansas City mascot is KC Wolf. KC Wolf is employed by the team. They go out and they mess around with the other mascots before the games. It's a job, it's a career. NFL is so popular that the mascots have knockoffs. They have people that act like they are the mascot. So this is a guy who's not KC Wolf, but he's a guy that goes to all the home games, all the road games. Everybody knows who he is, dressed up as KC Wolf. He's kind of created a little industry around it. Well, it turns out it's very expensive to go to all the home and away Kansas City Chiefs games, and he didn't have enough money to do it, so he had to come up with some money so he could afford to do it. So he came up with what he thought was a good business plan to come up with money. He decided that he would rob a bank. Okay, robbing banks is not a good business plan, all right? Like 100 years ago, before photography and all the tripwire, yeah. But he's no dummy. He thought, well, for me to rob a bank, I'm going to have to put on a disguise so that people don't know who I am. So let me show you the disguise. He somehow thought that by wearing the KC Wolf outfit, no one would know who he was, even though everyone in Kansas City knows who he is. So the police put out a report and said, here's a photograph of someone that's committed a bank robbery today. If anyone has information who this is, please let us know. It turned out that anyone didn't. Everybody knew who this guy was. and he is now in jail. So if you wonder, what does all of this have to do with us and the answer is nothing, okay? I just wanted to show you the pictures of our grandkids. And when I saw this photo, I thought, I gotta show this to everybody at the convention. It's just so crazy. Okay, update 2. This is a little more related, all right? Okay, this is Life Care at Kirkland. How could any of us forget Life Care at Kirkland? Not only the first nursing home in the country to get COVID, one of the very first places in the country to get COVID. And as soon as Life Care got COVID, all of a sudden, all these terrible negative headlines started showing up all over the place, all over the TV, how terrible Life Care was, how terrible nursing homes were, and all of that. Well, you might recall that 2 years ago, in this speech, we did a deep dive on the Kirkland situation. And when you do a deep dive, you learn that this was a 5-star facility with an excellent history of infection control, that had an amazing infection control nurse who thought that there was something going on, who kept saying to all the officials, hey, I think there might be COVID in the building, all of whom scoffed and some laughed and said, there isn't COVID in the United States. She was way ahead of the game, and yet when COVID hit and people died, she and the facility and the whole sector got the blame, and all these headlines occurred. When you really do a deep dive, you learn that they were not at fault. So, what's the update? The plaintiff's lawyer sued them anyway. Big surprise. After a couple of week trial last May, the jury went out and they came back and they had a complete defense verdict, complete exoneration of Life Care at Kirkland, no fault. So I couldn't wait. I got a text from Todd, the CEO, Todd Fletcher, and I couldn't wait to get up the next day to look at the newspapers to see how they were going to cover this, all right? So I woke up the next day. There were no stories. I put this Google search in, Life Care Center of Kirkland trial verdict, New York Times. You see what came up? No results found. After all of that incredibly negative publicity, there were no articles, virtually none across the country, about the trial result. So I asked our public affairs team to produce a newspaper that should have been printed the next day, and this is what they came up with. Kirkland cleared, its heroes did nothing wrong. Yeah. I know there are people from Life Care in the audience from all over the country. Could we just give them a round of applause to thank them for everything they've done? Okay, update 3, COVID. Where are we at? When I think about COVID, I think about 3 different nightmares that we have faced. The first nightmare is the clinical nightmare. The second nightmare is the business nightmare. And the third nightmare is the policy nightmare. So let me give you an update on where we stand on all 3. I think that we can say that the clinical nightmare is over. Thank God. This is a chart that shows the amount of COVID in buildings since the start of the pandemic. And although there are ups and downs, the bottom line, which is deaths, has been very low for the last several years. And we will continue to have COVID in our buildings. When you look at the history of pandemics, this virus will come back, and there may be even times where it comes back to these sort of spectacular peaks that we've seen before. But the other thing that we know from history is that when it does come back, typically, the virus is less dangerous. I think we can safely say that we have beaten this thing. We've got to stay vigilant. We've got to get folks vaccinated. We've got to do all that stuff. But the clinical nightmare is behind us. Unfortunately, the business nightmare is not. The business nightmare has 2 components, both of which are getting better, but I don't think I can truthfully stand here and say we're out of the woods yet. Occupancy, we're almost there. We had this deep dive all the way down to 67.5% back in 2020. We've had this slow recovery since then. We're getting there. I am hopeful that by this time next year when we're in Orlando, we're going to be back to pre-pandemic occupancy, and I think we're going to continue to slowly grow our occupancy for the next 3 to 5 years. Unfortunately, our workforce has not come back. Now, it's come back a little bit. We never want to overstate our case. These are the true numbers, but this is still an enormous challenge. At the bottom, we were down like 250,000 workers from what we had before the pandemic. Now we're down a little bit over 150,000 workers. Things are getting better. We're making progress, and I am hopeful that within a year we'll be back almost to normal and we can say the business nightmare is over, but it's not quite over yet. What's keeping me up at night right now is the policy nightmare. The policy nightmare has just started. And let me explain what I mean by that and what we need to do to end this nightmare. I've been involved in government for a long time. My first job was with Congressman Bill Green up in Washington, D.C. in 1980. It's been a long time. I've seen government from a lot of different angles. And I will tell you that the government is good at two things, but really only two things. And in fact, it is great at both of these things. The first thing it is great at doing is nothing. This is actually the specialty of government. And I mean, that's what this government shutdown was all about. This Congress, which has basically done nothing, was doing so little that they couldn't even do something so that they could continue to do nothing. So they got together over the weekend, said, let's do a little something, then we can do nothing for 45 days, and then we'll get together and we'll decide if we can do a little more something to do nothing even longer. Government is really good at that. Unfortunately, the other thing that it's good at is overreacting. When policy does occur, it often is just way over the top for what's needed. The proposed minimum staffing rule is an overreaction, a poor reaction to a horrible crisis that we all experienced. The minimum staffing rule is impossible to implement for two reasons. And you know this. The workers aren't there and there is no funding. We've already talked about the lack of workforce. This compares our workforce to all of the other healthcare providers. We've lost a ton of workers, they haven't. The thought that we could somehow replace these 150,000 people and then hire another 100,000 nurses is just ridiculous. And then the money isn't there. CMS did not fund this. The government did not fund this. They predict that it would cost $4 billion. We think it would cost $6 billion. Whether it's $4 or $6 billion, that's either $300,000 or $400,000 a building. In the unlikely event that we could somehow find these workers, there is just no way to pay for it. On top of that, there are also lots of specifics about the policy that are not well done. The penalties are too harsh. The waiver is impossible to get. And then by some incredible act of, well, maybe we should go back to my first update on dumbness, LPNs aren't counted. There's 120,000 of them in our buildings. They do great work for us. And they're not only not counted, they're deeply disrespected in the rule itself. It's a bad idea that's been put together in a bad way. So how do we win? How do we beat this thing? We beat it the way that we've won on various issues over the last 14 years. We stick together and we fight. When we do that, we win. I see these state associations where the people aren't together, they splinter off, they form other groups, they never win. At the national level, we've managed to hold everybody together. You've all made the decision to do that, and you haven't been passive, you've fought. And that's what we have to do on this issue. We know it will work. Just recent examples with this administration. When the vaccine mandate was announced in August of 2021, you may not remember this, but when it was first announced, it was only for skilled nurses. Hospitals started running ads saying, hey, if you're going to be forced to be vaccinated in skilled nursing homes, come to work for us. Within 5 days, we generated 5,000 emails, and I got a call from the White House where the words were, your members have changed our mind. Later that year, yep, you did it. Later that year, there was a proposed Medicare cut, 8,000 unique emails from you and other members. We reversed the policy and got a Medicare increase. And then more recently, the CDC had the very difficult masking standard that needed to be relaxed. Conditions had changed. They didn't want to do it. 6,000 unique emails that came from us, and the policy changed. We need your help one more time, and we're going to need your help on several occasions. First of all, we need you to submit comments. The comment period runs until November 6th. We need every single person in this room and folks that you work with back in your buildings to submit comments to CMS to let them know how impossible this policy would be. And then when we finish that phase of the effort, we need you to open your buildings up to members of Congress. We need you to come to DC and tell your story. And I know that if we do this, we will eventually prevail on this issue. So we need your help one more time. I have a strong belief that we will get it. People have already stepped up. We've received thousands of comments, and my hope and belief is that this time next year, when we do all this work that needs to be done, we'll be in Orlando and we can continue to say that the clinical nightmare is over. We may be able to say that the business nightmare is over, and we'll be well on our way to saying that the policy nightmare is almost over as well. I know that we can count on you because you've delivered time and time again. In the meantime, we thank you for your continued support of AHCA NCAL. We thank you very much for the work that you do in your buildings, and we hope that you have a great week here in Denver. Thank you all very much. Thank you.